247. Action in this realm of vibration is a duty, but let not your ego crave the fruits of action. Be not attached to either action or inaction. The Bhagavad Gita is a guide post, a guide map to liberation. And so it is not talking about how to live happily in this world. It's not talking how to live successfully in this world. And yet, indeed, you will find happiness if you follow its directions. You will find it even outwardly. For example, the action is a duty, but let not your ego crave the fruits of action. Now, as long as you're craving the fruits of action, you will not only be bound, but you'll also be unhappy. You'll always be thinking, well, will my horse come in? Will I have success? Will I get that job? Will I? You won't find happiness as long as there's this uncertainty in you. And the cure for that, on the one hand, is just not to care. But you see, a beautiful thing that the Gita says is that it's not enough not to care. What you must do is not be attached. You have to act. You have to care very much. And so what you need to do is God-reminding action. Do those actions which will bring you closer to Him. And they will differ. For example, the duty of a Shudra may be just to farm. I want to say maybe and not is because it's only sort of a symbol of the state of a Shudra, that he's a farmer. A person can be a farmer even if he works in an office. You've seen many dull-minded people in the office who can only sharpen their pencils, let's say. The important thing is that you do what you have to do, which will bring you closer to Him. So for a Shudra to act in such a way as to help other people, to serve people who are higher than he in consciousness, to mix with people who are more highly developed spiritually. This is what a Shudra can do. He can't do very much, as it says, as Krishna says in the Gita, that a Shudra is like an embryo in a womb. You can only wait for it to come out. It takes its normal 9 months or maybe 90,000 incarnations, who knows how many lives we have to live to get out of this mess. But the thing is, sooner or later we have to reach that point where we understand that, well, this isn't giving me what I want. I have a brain. This is what comes to a Shudra. I have a brain that can think. And if I use my brain, I find I can get more than if I don't use it. And so he begins to become intelligent but crafty. And so the Vaishya is that kind of person, not necessarily a merchant, but a person who thinks, how can I use my intelligence in a clever way to get my best advantages? And using his intelligence slyly, cleverly, whatever it means, he always does it for himself. He tries to think how he can cheat the other person or best him in competition and so on. But this is a Vaishya state. And when he learns that he's happier, and this takes time again, maybe another 90,000 years, who knows? At any rate, sooner or later he begins to understand that he feels happier when he's sharing with people, not when he's holding things for himself. When he has, first of all, he thinks in terms of his own family. And he gets money for himself, but then he thinks, well, I have a wife, I have children. I want to send the children to college because then they'll be richer and get a good job and be able to help support the family and maybe get me more money and so on. So even for selfish motives, he begins to think in terms of helping other people. But only his family, us four and no more, so to speak. Then gradually, he begins to find that helping other people gives him a certain happiness that he didn't have before. As long as he was only thinking of getting things, he may accumulate a large bank account, but it somehow doesn't make him happy, like Howard Hughes, who said at the end of his life, I can't say that I'm happy. We have to understand that that search for bliss is a constant in the Shudra, in the Vaishya, and everybody. And when the Vaishya comes to the point where he understands that he's he's not finding the happiness he wants. And then he understands further that when he shares with other people and makes them happy too, his own happiness enlarges, it expands. And so gradually he becomes a Kshatriya. And a Kshatriya is one who thinks in terms of offering even his life for the welfare of other people. Saints have been willing to sacrifice, to martyr themselves for their beliefs, for the sake of others. Look at all those Christians in the Forum of Rome who willingly were killed by lions or went to the stake just because they believed in God and in Jesus Christ. That is a refined state. And this is the state of a true Kshatriya. A true Kshatriya is not just a warrior. A true Kshatriya is one who is offering his very life for the sake of others. Now, a Kshatriya also is offering his life at the expense of other people's lives. In other words, his duty is to fight, to kill, to repress in some way. Is that a good thing? Well, this is a very interesting point, ahimsa. We must understand. I had this experience which I told you about, killing that snake, and then suddenly realizing it wasn't a dangerous rattlesnake. But my guru always said, it is better to let a person or an animal of lower evolution suffer death than a person of high evolution, like a human being, an animal of high resolution. When I see those ads saying there are only 4,000 and something tigers in the country, and let's save them, I have to ask myself, why save them? They're a threat to human life. I don't have that sentiment, and I hope you'll forgive me. But the truth is that if we understand that the role of a Kshatriya is ahimsa, he must do his duty, but he must do it, as Krishna says here, without attachment to duty. The less you have attachment to duty, the more you can see clearly what is right and what is wrong. You may, with attachment, feel that it's good to eat meat, but when you realize this means killing an animal to eat, then maybe it isn't right. I remember I was reading Autobiography of a Yogi when I was 22, and the moment my guru mentioned in Autobiography of a Yogi that he was a vegetarian, I said, okay, no more meat. I had always thought that meat eating was necessary, but if it wasn't necessary, fine. I quit it. I've never had meat since. The understanding of why we do things is very helpful. I remember that same evening, some friends of my family invited me over for dinner. And in that dinner, they gave chicken a la king, which is chicken with vegetables. So I didn't want to hurt their feelings, so I pushed the meat to one side and just ate the vegetables. But the next evening, another friend invited me to dinner because I was alone then at that time. And his mother gave me hamburgers. Well, I just refused to eat them. And I had read in the Autobiography of a Yogi that Yogananda was a monk. All right, I would be a monk. And I remember this boy whose mother gave me hamburger thoughtfully provided me with a date that evening. And I just sat as far away from that girl as possible because I had decided I too would be a monk. But that power of that book just absolutely changed my life. But it's when you have attachment to the fruits that you find you can't change. You must understand that seeking God must also be without attachment. I wanted him desperately, but I didn't want him with an attached feeling. I wanted freedom. You must have the right motive for wanting God. You must want freedom. You must want bliss. Those are the two motives. And when you have the desire for bliss, then you understand that by attachment, you lose that bliss. Attachment means, will I lose it? Then you haven't, if you've thought of losing it, you've lost it already. Attachment means that, oh, what if I do lose it? Then you've lost it already. You've got to, this is why Krishna said, we have to act without desire for the fruits of our action. And this would make a person think, and this is what many university professors in America on talking about the Gita do think, but it's wrong. when you don't desire the fruits of action, that doesn't mean you don't desire to do right. You desire to do right without being influenced to wanting this or that. That which is right is very often not which is what you want. You have to remember, I remember my guru, he asked me when I met him he gave me his unconditional love and asked for mine. And then he said, give me your unconditional obedience. And I said, sir, what if I find sometimes that I think you're wrong? And he said, I will never ask anything of you that God himself does not ask. So I said, in that case, I completely give you my unconditional obedience. But there were times when he asked things of me that I thought weren't right. But I remembered my vow and I kept to it. But one of the things that I thought was wrong was that I had become too intellectual. When I had done a lot of reading, a lot of thinking, I thought my way to God. I would like to say that I felt my way to him, but I came through thinking, not through devotion. Later came the devotion when I realized, I reached the point where I said, but I'm not happy. And I remembered how happy I had been as a child. And I thought, there's something wrong with this mind that keeps asking why. There has to be something deeper. And that was when I met my guru. But he used to tell me, get devotion. And I worked hard on that. And I remember one time he said, keep on with your devotion. See how dry your life was when you depended on intellect. Well, that was true. But while he was telling me to give up my dependence upon my intellect, he gave me a job of editing, and he gave me a job of studying. And I thought, but this is contrary. This is going to feed my intellect. And if I feed my intellect, how can I'll be starving my devotion. And how can I follow the thing he himself told me to do, develop devotion, if I'm becoming more intellectual? And so he had me editing his writings, and he had me editing the magazine, and he had me studying his lessons, and he had me reading all of them in a very short space of time, and getting ready to understand his teachings intellectually as well as devotionally. And I felt he must be wrong. But I found, because I did obey him and I did follow anyway, but I do remember one time I wrote him a note and said, please forgive me for what I was thinking. He knew all my thoughts, and I knew that he knew my thoughts because he frequently showed it to me. But in this case, he called me on the telephone. He said, your letter is absolutely incomprehensible. So I explained to him that what I meant was that I didn't want to be intellectual. He didn't justify it. All he said was, living for God is martyrdom. Well, okay, I had to take it. There are many times he forced me to reach his own level of understanding and not trying to walk me through it with slow intellectual explanations. But I found in time, and this was very important for me, that I didn't need to starve my faculties in order to develop my devotion. What I needed was to develop every part of me, and to develop my intellect, to develop my intellectual understanding of the teachings was something I could offer other people. I could have that kind of understanding more than most people. And it didn't deprive me of my devotion, because I also learned to understand it with my heart and not only with my intellect. So his insistence that I do these intellectual labors actually turned out to be for my great spiritual advantage. But this is why I'm so grateful that he asked me to give him my unconditional obedience, because I was not the kind of person who would obey anybody normally, but I found that everything he told me was absolutely the best for me. He had me study those lessons. He even had me become the examiner, so that when people sent in questions to the exam at the end of each step, I was the one who checked that. And it was my job to reorganize most of the organization, the office, the monks, the churches, the lay disciple order, just about everything from top to bottom. And yet I found that in all of that, because I worked with devotion, it all helped me to find God. I'm glad I'm not doing that kind of work anymore because it was so against my own grain. But to organize is a part of something that I can give people. The thing is, I know I've done that in the past. I know that I understand. I can see any particular proposal and see miles down the road where the result of that will be. This, you might say, is intuition on an intellectual level. But these are sort of abilities that we develop over many lives. But I've understood that without attachment, I can understand clearly, I can see clearly what the truth is. If I am attached, and if I want the results of my action, I find that my mind becomes clouded. Non-attachment to the fruits of action is absolutely necessary, but non-action is absolutely not necessary. You must act. You're in the realm of vibration. You can't exist without vibration. Om is the cosmic vibration. You can't breathe without acting. You can't think without acting. You cannot avoid activity, but you can avoid wrong activity. And this is to not have any attachment to what you're doing and realize that what you're doing, do it for God. Do it to please Him, not to please yourself. And don't say that I want this result, because that will confuse the mind. This is the main reason for Nishkam Karma. You don't have attachment to it, you don't cling to it, you offer it all to Him. To enjoy everything with the joy of God is freedom. Joy to you.